analogy.
Yeah,
it's going to be a long pandemic.
It is going to be a long pandemic.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And as this sort of new world order is unfolding, more than ever, we really want to double down on our invitation to get into the Facebook group, which you can find on our website at sohere'smystory.com. More than ever, I think we're going to need some real, honest business conversations and helping each other out and thinking this through. So please do jump in. Now that we're kind of getting settled in, I know I'm going to be spending a lot more time in there, starting and participating in conversations. And, you know, it takes a village. So hop on in. So here's my story. Flipping through my Facebook feed, I saw a friend of mine post something along the lines of, I have determined that my coping mechanism with uncertainty does not mesh with my husband's coping mechanisms for uncertainty.
Yeah,
it's going to be a long pandemic.
It is going to be a long pandemic.
So the interesting thing is, I definitely want to talk about that aspect because I'm not just seeing that with households, but I am really seeing that in like leadership teams. But what it surfaced for me is what I think is actually, I have a bit of a list, and I have no doubt that you will be able to chime in very quickly. Sort of the alternate universe version of a quote that we use all the time, which is, you know, progress looks like a new set of problems, you know, that as you evolve towards a goal, you know, have new problems to deal with that you've never had to deal with before. And apparently that is also true with whatever the opposite of, you know, progress is, massive uncertainty and like global pandemics. Mm-hmm. And like, this is, if there is a word that captures where we are right now, it is uncertainty. It is just this giant pit of uncertainty. And not only is that anxiety producing, but it also, it doesn't give us a really clear path forward. And it is surfacing a whole list of new problems that no one has ever had to deal with before. So I want to kind of list a few of them, and then we'll come back and kind of deep dive. So one is this mismatched coping mechanism strategy. Some people want to just focus on the good, which makes other people anxious because then they're worried that that person doesn't really recognize the gravity of a thing. Other people, you know, some people want to get super plan oriented. Other people want to say, no, we can't plan ahead. We have to be agile. And just, I could name 1,000 other things. So that's one. I have more, but I don't want to just talk for the first 20 minutes by myself.
So one of them for me is leadership. And I think that the coping mechanism for leadership, whether it's at home or being, you know, your stereotypical strong and you know, role model, head of the family or whatever you want to call it, is to tough it out.
I love the posture. You're making this very like, I'm a Viking kind of.
You tough it out. So, in business, that means that you can see all these things coming, but you want to reassure people that everything is going to be fine. We're going to, which it will, but we're going to get through this. And and here's the part that I'm really thinking about. I'm going to come into the office because it's business as usual. We're going to continue. Our doors are still open. And, you know, in a way, that's what President Trump did, because the way you approach this, and frankly, Herbert Hoover did this during the outside of the Great Depression. What Herbert Hoover had said is, look, our steel factories have not evaporated into dust. Mm-hmm. Our production capacity is still there. Our farmland is still fertile. I don't understand, you know, this Great Depression doesn't mean anything because everything is fine. We still have all the means of production in our economy. So he didn't address it because his way of addressing it was to say, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And we should, and downplaying the dramatic results. A lot of times in business, a leader will come in and will maintain business as usual to set an example that it can be business as usual, where here on its head, leadership is the opposite, recognizing and adjusting to the fact that it is not business as usual.
And that it's actually the most leaderly thing to do to, you know, I've heard some people say, well, you know, almost there's the business as usual side. I've also heard that almost kind of not captain goes down with the ship, but like captain shows up even if it's snowing and icy and rainy. Like we're here to set a good example.
That's exactly right.
And one of the other people at the table, when I heard somebody say like, well we can make a live this. And to be honest, one thing I really want to acknowledge on this show, because I've been feeling it, we record like a week in advance. Mm-hmm. I felt like our last 2 episodes about this issue, by the time it comes out, I'm like, well, that's old news. You know what I mean? So who knows where we'll be in another week when this episode comes out.
Well, the first one we did on coronavirus,
yeah,
I did it. I remember, I'm not proud of this, by the way, but I remember saying to you, I remember saying to you, well, let's do a podcast on coronavirus. And you know why? I thought that was funny.
Because no, you thought it was funny?
No, I didn't think the virus itself was funny, but I thought that the fact, we're doing a podcast. It's like we're not going to infect anybody. So it's kind of the irony of talking about a virus when it doesn't affect what we're doing was kind of interesting.
Right.
And then I started thinking about it as we got closer to recording. I thought, let's just do that. But I didn't think it was anything
timely
much.
Or important.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting more than it was vital.
And I don't know about you, but I am now feeling like guidance in leadership conversations is one of the most core things. Like I was sitting in a meeting, I'll get back to the point I was making in a second, but I was sitting in a meeting and someone said, well, I don't know that we'll have to figure that out. The powers that be will probably put some, and I said, guys, pause for a second. Also remember that you are the powers that be for these 300 people we're making decisions for. Like this is moving so quickly. You can't wait for other people to make decisions. We have to make smart decisions, and we have almost as much information as they have to go on because it's rolling out so quickly. So there is that kind of when I heard somebody say, we need to set a good example, and one of the other people at the table said, right, but the problem is this is a different kind of good example to set than we have ever had to set
That's
before.
The point.
We have to set the example that you don't have to be, that we want you to be home.
That you have to set the example of reacting to the circumstances as opposed to just setting the example of overcoming the circumstances.
Right. So that's a whole new uncertainty that no one's ever had. So that's one kind of piece of it. But I really do want to come back. So now all these people are home. Now you're having these same dynamics happening in your household. Surfacing some of these other kind of little issues is just what issues will now surface with this kind of isolation in your home kind of thing.
Yeah.
You'll have those dynamics of different coping mechanisms. You'll have the dynamics of, there's a whole thing happening with like introversion versus extroversion. Mm-hmm. For better or for worse, poor introverts have had to adapt and come up with coping mechanisms for living in a pretty predominantly extroverted world for the most part, unless your business has, if you're a freelancer, you found ways to work mostly by yourself. But, introverts not only are going to be more okay in this isolation kind of thing, but they have like not thicker skin in the way that term's usually used, but they have muscles built up for living in a world that doesn't feel naturally fit for them. Extroverts do not.
Well, you say that, and I get exactly why you say that, but remember that introverts, speaking for all of my people out there, hello, introverts.
I am ambiverted. So.
All of a sudden have all these extroverts in their space.
Yes.
And they have to stay there. I mean, look, and we've talked about this.
Away. Yeah.
When my nightmare is a party on a boat.
Right.
So, because when I don't want to be at a party, I leave.
Well, no, these are the things. Like I have not. Yes, everybody's panicking about, the economy and food and toilet paper. But I will tell you right now with great certainty, if I had photos of the people's faces I have talked to when they are talking about those things versus photos of people's eyeballs when we talk about this, their own version of the introversion extra. Yeah, introverts are like, they're going to be here all day long in my house. And I'm used to having time by myself. And then my extroverts, I have several like startup founder, crazy extroverted people who live by themselves, who honestly are like, I don't know what if I can't talk, like, I don't know what it's going to be. What will I do? And video chat helps. It absolutely helps, but it does not scratch the itch of extroverts and people who love to like hug and like their love language is touch. And that makes them feel like connected to the world. Like this all sounds very petty and silly, but it is a real thing. Like it is something people are going to be getting crankier and crankier about while we're also trying to navigate this other stuff.
I will tell you, and I think we talked about this on the show, when I did the Komen 60-mile walk with my friend, it was 3 days, 20 miles per day. I had to say to him, because he's very extroverted, very talky, whatever. I had to say to him, because he's like, are you nervous about the walk? You know, it's a lot of distance. I was like, I'm not worried about the distance. I can't talk to you or anybody for 5 hours.
Right.
I can't. So we have to.
So you just made the panic face that I'm talking about. It's like, I can't be that person.
So there are going to be times and hours, and I'm just going to wander off and whatever. There are thousands of people you can talk to.
Chat to that guy.
And he was actually, we've known each other since college, and he was very grateful that I had this conversation with him. Because he would have felt guilty if I wasn't talking to somebody.
Well, but that's exactly right. He's like, oh, I don't want Elliot to feel like he's alone,
lonely
so
or
I'm
left out.
So he might actually be stressed by coming up. He's like, I think of something new to say to Elliot, and you're like, no, actually,
I'm
really
finding my own little world.
Yeah, exactly.
But now you're thrown together, and so introverts and extroverts and ambiverts,
or thrown apart, or people are isolated.
Yeah, so your whole support system is changed, whatever that support system looks like to you.
Oh, I have an elderly friend who, because it's, in theory, some of my younger, people who are less at risk, I'll just say, it's not even an older, younger thing, because sometimes it's health issues as well. There are some people who in theory could find ways to get together and just keep a good social distance and whatnot. But if I have a client who's 75 and has some underlying health issues and he lives by himself, and he said, I can't risk being out there. He was like, but I am terrified of the loneliness and the isolation and how this is going to feel. It's a very real thing. So there's that bit. That I think it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. I will say, I do want to hit on a couple of these new problems, like how you keep employees from feeling less isolated. Like one conversation I was having with one leadership team yesterday was kind of towards the end of the evening. I said, guys, like, yes, you are up to your eyebrows, if not above, in tactical and logistical and strategic issues about how we do this, and everything from who will answer the phones to how people work from home to what do we do about this to, can we draw on the line, all the really big decisions. I said, but you cannot forget to pause and find ways. It doesn't have to be scalable. It doesn't have to take up a ton of time, but you have to find ways to pause and connect with the people who work for you and in this organization, and remind them that you remember that they are humans going through a scary thing. Just a quick text like, how you doing? It's it's the people have to feel, we can't forget that there are humans in all of this and not just the big fires we're putting out.
Yeah, and it's not just humans going through a scary thing, but it's also that they're still part of an organizational family. So I've been talking to some of my clients, and this is some things that I've been working on with a number of my clients, especially those who have workers going from home. And what I've encouraged them to do is, all right, with different practice areas or whatever, pick an online learning, whether it's Udemy or something like that, and create a virtual book club. And I use book club, not necessarily a printed book, but it could be either a digital book or it could be a course. And the course could be on anything from your particular discipline, project management, to how to do Instagram better, or how to crochet, but
something that feels like community.
Yes, but you create a community.
Oh, I love that.
And so that we're not only doing Zoom calls or Skype calls when we're talking about this project or this contract or this work thing, but we've created like a pod in our organization, and we're going to. These people are interested in learning about digital photography. And you actually say as an organization, you know what, we're going to pay for, because they're dirt cheap, a lot of these courses. We're going to pay for these courses. Everybody can enroll in one or two elective courses, provided you set a time regularly, whether it's once a day, every other day, or whatever, to get together in your group, in your pod, and discuss it and go over, and you connect. So you form these communities where none existed before.
So here's a really deeply important point that I feel like I'm going to find myself saying a lot as we go forward. And again, this is not a self-promotion thing when I say this, but hop into the Facebook group, because I feel like now more than ever we can support each other in thinking through and finding new ways to adapt to what's coming down the pike. But there's this reminder that I keep saying, because what we are most present to at the moment is that all the math that we have used to figure out things in the world feels different, right? You're
Yes.
like, oh, everything is changing. And everything that we are afraid of, they are legitimate concerns and fears, but I really just want to keep, and I have some great examples of this. I want to keep reminding people that in times of this much uncertainty, it is not just the math on the side of the equation that is causing problems that is changing. The consequences outcome side of the math formula is also going to be changing and adapting and coming up with new ways. And I have a couple examples.
So explain more about that.
So I mean, in the biggest picture of the way, and I have no idea what these solutions will look like, but when this kind of stuff happens, I feel pretty certain that, every single person who can't pay their rent isn't going to get evicted, and every single mortgage isn't going to get foreclosed on, and every single person will go bankrupt. It's just not, that's not conceivable. There will be tons of that, and it is going to be really difficult. But there will be places in I already have one client, and then I have some more fun kind of examples of this too. I have one client whose commercial, they just bought a building a few years ago. Their commercial bank has already reached out to them and said, we're this is live updating. We're working on this, but we are considering, we're sort of well on our way to a plan where we will convert all loans to interest only, which puts a nice little bit of a middle ground in it. It takes some of the pressure off needing the cash flow, which also gives that landlord the opportunity to give some of their people who are renting from them price breaks. Because I've heard people say, like, no one should have to pay rent. I'm like, well, don't forget those people who own the buildings also often have mortgages.
But that is a fascinating thing. This is not the rabbit hole to go down at this time, but when the bank says we're almost there or we're leaning towards or whatever, they've kind of committed. Because
so this was a personal relationship. This was not a mass email they sent out.
Because if it's a mass email, then you've set the expectation and you can't go back.
No, it was like his banker had reached out and he said, I can't make a promise, but just I feel like we know each other well enough that you can trust that if this doesn't work out, I wasn't feeding you a bag of whatever. That this is that, but just to give you a little bit of relief, we are working on this proposal, and would that be helpful? He was also reaching out to get how helpful would that be? Because if it's not helpful, maybe that's not the right way. But everyone is going to have to recognize and decide kind of, I've seen a bunch of people saying, look, if my kids aren't at daycare, I shouldn't have to pay for it. I'm like, right. If we look at any individual aspect of the economic food chain, any individual interaction might seem fair or good, but you cannot ignore then what that means in the ripple effect.
So to give you a hard example, my gym closed. I go to Padonia Brick Bodies, and they closed. And so Nikki had said to me, what do you think? Are they going to stop with dues? And my reaction, and this was later mirrored in the email, soon after I got an email from the manager of the gym saying we're stopping with dues. But I wrote back to her and I said, look, here's what I want to know. Is the gym going to continue paying the hourly workers that would normally staff the gym? Because if the answer is no,
then don't take my dues.
Then why don't you send out an email to people asking if they'd be willing to continue paying dues as long as you pay the hourly? So because I, for one, I would pay my dues if you say that the hourly folks who collect the towels and do everything are going to continue getting paid.
I am awash in goosebumps, because that is exactly the kind of those kinds of answers are not going to come from the powers that be. This is not the governments at all levels will absolutely have a role in relief efforts and bailouts, whatever form they take. I don't think that is where the most problems will be solved, though. Scrappy, resourceful, creative people will find ways to solve these problems. And so here's another example. I sing in a band, and I'm part of a big music community. We were already in Facebook groups of Fells Point musicians and things like that. Well, some of those, we do it for fun, and it's like a hobby for me. Some of those people rely on that money. Living. That is their living. Yeah. And that has ground to a halt, as you can imagine. And so as are the wait staff and the bartenders and the people who own the bars. So here's an interesting thing that is happening. And it's unfolding. I don't know how this will all work out, but I love the coming together energy. So for one thing, because you can also match up with that a lot of us don't just get dollars from playing, but it's almost like the extroversion thing. Like if I'm not playing music after a while, like I'm like, like they need that, like playing and having other people listen. So already last night they started, it started with just this one woman saying, I was supposed to have a gig tonight. It's canceled. So I'm going to do a Facebook Live instead. And she sat on her couch and she played all this music and people like requested songs and cheered and, and all that kind of stuff. So then it developed from there. Somebody was like, hey, maybe we could make like this kind of network where it'd be like, oh, Jody's playing at the Horseshoe came in on tonight. And then they hooked it up with this like Venmo thing. And so people are like tipping each other and they're going to work in the bartenders and the wait staff. It's not going to be money to live off of, but I'm not saying it's solving a problem, but that kind of thinking, if thought at a larger scale, actually can. Exactly like you're saying, like, how can we all think about, I've heard things with restaurants, like originally I heard people saying buy gift certificates, at those restaurants that you'll use later. I have other friends who have said, I just like, we typically eat out like 3 times a week. So I'm just going to buy stuff from them. Now restaurants, you can still get delivery. So there's that. There are ways that I have a friend, I was just thinking like I typically, this friend of mine goes and gets massages from this person like every 6 weeks. And she said, I'm still going to just, for now, she goes, I don't know if I'll continue to be able to do this, but I'm just going to send her the money every 6 weeks because, I want her to still be a massage therapist when this is all over at some point. And she may not be able to continue to do that, but point being, I think there are ways that we can, and I just read, and this is funny, my daughter was super upset about Mulan not coming out because she was really excited to see it. And I had this thought, like, I wonder if some of these not agencies, I can't think of the right word, whatever, film production places will do some sort of like pay-per-view or whatever. And apparently they are Universal or somebody.
Universal
Paramount?
is coming out. No, Universal, a number of them are, but Universal are coming out with the streaming services,
that they're going to release it the same day, but not on, not in the theaters, which, let's say that's going to hurt the theaters' economics. Well,
the theaters' economics are going to be hurt regardless.
Exactly. So I said this phrase this morning that I think is kind of in all of this, because we're going to have this scrappy, resourceful thinking. It's not going to be perfect, but I really feel like, messy good enough is going to have to be the new excellence for a while.
Yeah, I think really to me, what really stands out is the art and the benefit of being proactive. So to see the new world through the eyes of your customers, of your clients, of even your vendors, the people who rely on you, and then figuring out a way to be proactive in first acknowledging those needs. You don't even have to have a way to address them. If you first acknowledge them and maybe start to crowdsource certain solutions on how this can work better. So that, for example, with a number of my clients, I've reached out and I've said, look, we're doing distance learning now, and would it be helpful? And no charge for this, I'm not looking for new business for this, but would it be helpful if we arrange weekly Zoom calls with your superintendents and I can talk about, contracts or the legal side of things or communication skills, and other people can do that. It doesn't matter whether they take me up on that or not. What matters is that they start thinking of ways in this new reality, and we can kind of collaboratively address how we do this. And so what I keep getting, the feedback is, even if they're not interested, the feedback is so grateful for reaching out and being proactive as opposed to everybody hunkering down in their separate bunkers and waiting for the powers that be to fix stuff.
Right.
So I think that the benefit really is the proactivity.
The proactivity, and also the sort of mass brainstorming and creativity. It's that like new problems can also lead to new solutions. Because the other phrase we say quite often is, every solution comes with a new set of problems. But But if you follow that out, the reason that that is okay is that every new problem has space for new solutions. And trust me, I'm not putting some like sparkly unicorn silver lining on all this. We are in for probably months and months of some really dire, and I mean, there's a lot of really unpleasant things probably on the way. And so it's sobering when I really think about it. But that is yet another thing that's not binary. This is not only going to be a sad time. We have the opportunity to really think of this and the whole new world for new, like every one of those problems has new solutions. Some of them we won't be able to fix. But I don't know if you saw there was a perfume company that I saw that has, obviously they're not going to be selling tons of perfume, whatever. They've stopped and they're manufacturing hand sanitizer. Yeah, we all have skills and gifts and thoughts and creativity. And if we pull together, we can't fix this, but we can make it less bad.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
Lovingly
snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.